Welcome to another episode of the Underground Bunker Podcast. Once again, I have the amazing Apostate Alex, Alex Barnes-Ross. Thanks for coming back, man.
Thanks for having me. Merry Christmas. I hope
Same
you're
to
having a
you.
good holiday season and everyone listening is prepared for the festive season.
Our Sixmas, some of us call it, but yes, Merry Christmas. Um, what I wanted to talk to you about this week is you and I have had some fun recently. Audio of Scientology leader David Miscavige's big speech he made at the IAS gala, and now audio of his New Year's Eve speech, which Scientologists themselves haven't even heard yet, got into our hands. You posted the audio, I posted the transcript. And I don't know, it's been a few years since we've had this close an eye on exactly what David Miscavige is telling the troops. And it's also a big time because this is when he has resurrected the IAS gala in England and the New Year's event in Los Angeles. So it's kind of a turning point for them. But we've got every word, just about every word he said at both events for hours. And I've been seeing a lot of really interesting reactions, but I thought, you and I could go over some of the points in there, some of the things that surprised you. Um, let's start with ideal orgs because that's such a big deal to him. The ideal org started 20 years ago now. In 2003, I think the first three opened were Buffalo, New York, Tampa, Florida, and Johannesburg, South Africa. And at that point, Mike Rinder had told me that they had to be replaced for one reason or another. In Buffalo, because they had an eminent domain thing, Buffalo wanted to turn it into a parking lot or something. In Tampa, the place was just so run down, it was embarrassing. And in Johannesburg, it was in such a bad shape and such a bad neighborhood. Some staffers had been killed, like really bad crime neighborhood. So they had to replace all three. And then Miscavige is like, well, as long as we're replacing them, let's make them ideal. And he started this program to replace every regular org around the world. And they're up to 68 now. I know he said 72 in his speech, but I think he's counting some advanced orgs. 68 regular ideal orgs around the country. The last he opened was in February 2020, just before the pandemic started, in Ventura, California. And now at the beginning of this year, 2023, he said he was going to open four in the first quarter. That didn't happen. Now he says he is going to open them in January and February, and I think he will. And he revealed that they are Paris, France, Austin, Texas, Chicago, Illinois, and Mexico City. And this will be the second one in Mexico City. I believe they already have another one. Tell me what you think about him opening four ideal orgs in the beginning of 2024 and in those locations in particular. Do you have any thoughts about that, Alex?
Yeah, I think firstly, before we get into it too much, I wanted to give a shout out to the people that have enabled this to happen because, with the IES event, I sent someone into an org to go and record the IES event and, they were completely up for it and, were happy to oblige. And so firstly, thank you to that person who I'm going to keep anonymous for now, but we wouldn't have that audio without that other person. So thank you for that person. And also to Chris Shelton, because, he was the one that gave us the audio from the New Year's event that someone had sent him. So thanks to Chris, because I think it's really important because, like you say, there hasn't been a full event video or audio leak for years. And I think it's really timely because, like you say, these two events are really important in the world of Scientology. There was a lot riding on the IES event, and I think there was a lot of Dave Miscavige has to prove a lot, I think, to Scientologists because he's been kind of silent for a while and he's made a couple of promises about, like you say, opening orgs at the beginning of this year that haven't materialized. The pressure is mounting internally, and I think being able to actually hear the audio itself, hear his own words, gives us a really unique insight, like you say, that we wouldn't have otherwise just from reading reports and the PR, like press release and that sort of thing. So fascinating. And on the ideal orgs, yeah, I think, like I said, the pressure is on because he said Chicago and these other orgs would open at the beginning of this year and they didn't. So I think a lot of people in Scientology are probably thinking, what happened? why haven't they happened? As much as there wouldn't be too much, pressure in terms of people won't get angry or annoyed, it will be in the back of people's minds when they're sat there at the New Year's event at the Shrine Auditorium. They'll be thinking, why aren't we hearing about the opening of the orgs that last time we heard Dave Miscavige speak, he told us was going to happen? So he had to be very careful with the words he chose, I think. And it was just all fluff, really, in my opinion. It was, just more of the same. Nothing, spectacular was said. But I think if he doesn't actually open these orgs in January or February, it's going to be a problem. And it's all a problem of his own creation. He could have just not announced it, back in January of last year. And he could have just not brought it up in this event, and no one would even know. So he's made the situation worse for himself. But without that information, what is there to say? He needs some sort of news. So I get it. But I think it's interesting that the focus was Chicago in the last New Year's event, and now it's Paris, even though Chicago is in the list. I totally think that Paris will happen, whether or not they have the staff. There's a minimum number of staff, and there's certain requirements for ideal orgs to meet before they can open, and that's one of the things that held back Chicago, because they didn't have the staff to open as ideal. I get the sense that Paris will open regardless. I saw a post on an internal Facebook group earlier today that Scientologists is for just Scientologists. And there's lots of pictures going up every day of French staff members training at St. Hill and building up the hype. And, the post today said that they are only 18 staff short of the full requirement to open as ideal, and they are very much saying it is opening in January. So it'll be interesting. It's a huge building. It used to be the Samsung headquarters in Saint Denis, and the locals were not happy about it when they purchased the building. It was done in the same way Scientology infiltrated Clearwater. They set up an American company called Buildings Investments Group, and they then purchased the building for 33 million euros. The French government were on it. They knew that it was Scientology somehow, and the local authorities and locals tried to put a stop to the purchase, the sale of the building, and have been back and forth trying to stop it happening. But for whatever reason, they've not been able to. They are not wanted in that area. The local government issued a statement that said, "You are not welcome here. You are not wanted in this community." So there's a lot of pressure on them, but regardless, they're just going to carry on. It's definitely going to happen. It's a lovely looking building. It cost a lot of money, but I wouldn't be surprised if when they open, it's just empty, because there aren't that many Scientologists in France, let alone Paris.
Well, and Stephanie Hutchinson wrote a really nice piece for your website about the sort of history of Scientology in France, and she went over some of those issues about the purchasing of the building. And one of the things I'm glad was in that article is they showed some maps. You posted some maps with her article, which show the proximity of this facility to the Olympic Stadium. And Scientology thought about that for years, because they love the idea of showing up at the Super Bowl, showing up at the Olympics, handing out literature and that kind of thing. As far as it being empty, though, Rod Keller once did a really nice piece for me where he talked about the cycle of an ideal org. That, yeah, they have to have, they say that they have to have this huge staff to open. And then for the first year, they have to win the birthday game, right? They have to do everything they can. It'll be tough for this year because you'll have four of them all competing for it. But they put a huge amount of effort. Then after the birthday game the following year, then it empties out and just goes to nothing. And I mean, you can see it. There are ideal orgs in this country that have like staffs of 2 or 3. There's nobody going into those places.
Yeah.
And another thing, also the other thing I want to point out is Chicago in January. Is he nuts? Oh my God. Now, Austin, we did see that they have taken out a permit for street closures on January 13th. So that definitely seems to be happening. Austin in January might be nice. I don't know. I don't spend too much time in Texas. I think it can be cold though. But Chicago in January or February? Oh my goodness. That's just going to be a disaster.
The same with Paris. You know, Paris and London have very similar weather. I have spent a lot of time in Paris with, you know, work and that sort of thing. It is cold in January. You know, it would be much better to hold back until April, and it's much nicer. And they still get to have the opening and, you know, be there for the Olympics and all of that. But you know, I think that, like I said, the pressure is on to get them open. And even though it's going to be horrible weather, I think it's just going to happen. And I think Paris is going, we're going to hear a lot from Paris, I think, over the next year. Right? That's why I'm focusing on that one, particularly because with the Olympics happening literally a stone's throw away from the Stade de France, which is the main stadium for the Olympics, they are going to use that as a PR activity. As we all know, they did it in London for the Olympics. They did it, you know, like say the Super Bowl. They're going to have huge funding to open the Ideal Org and do the non-E campaign and do adverts and all this sort of stuff. I think they'll probably chuck a load of extra money for the Truth About Drugs and human rights campaigns to promote them at the Olympics just around the corner. I think they're going to put a lot of effort into establishing Paris as an org. And especially considering they are considered a sect, they are considered a cult, they are not recognized in France. They've had a lot of opposition there for decades. Any sort of recognition they can get or approval, if even if it's just, you know, the French authorities giving up and being like, okay, whatever, you can give out your booklets at the Olympics, something as simple as that, I think will be seen as a major win for Scientology in France. So I think this year coming is going to be huge for that org in particular. And it shows they've spent loads more money on that building than most, if not all, other ideal orgs that I know of. 33 million euros for effectively a very brand new building that used to be the Samsung headquarters. It's a huge office building. It's a big glass kind of, you know, skyscraper business looking. I think there's more to this story, and I think we're going to see more from it over the following year. But like I said, the government reckons there's only about 2,000 Scientologists in the whole of France, even though Scientology say there are whatever 100, 200,000. You know, it's going
They're
to be empty
dreaming to
once
say that
this
there's
is over. The
2,000. There's
promo.
200.
Yeah. Well, once the promo is over, once the Olympics is out of the way, you know, Miscavige is going to send Sea Org members from the INT base to come and be there and personally handle the Olympic. Like, there will be a big flurry of activity, but I think, yeah, you're right. After the first year, it'll very quickly empty out, and there won't be any public.
Well, look, I mean, they have been descending on the Super Bowl every year with their pamphlets and people that show up to give interviews and then the big ad for 10 years, and they basically have nothing to show for it. So, you know, again, we will see, like you're saying, we're going to see a big effort at the Olympics, but what is it going to do? I mean, it's not like people in France want to join Scientology.
Yeah, exactly. And they'll use anything they can. You know, they hired, when the London Olympics happened, 2012, they hired a big red London bus and they did a tour through the city and gave out Truth About Drugs booklets. You know, that was all run by Mark Pinchin, the director of special affairs at London, who I knew very well. He's the one that got me to join staff in the first place. And I was meant to work with him very closely. And he was a volunteer at the Olympics, and he would go and talk at events about how he volunteered. And, you know, he's a Scientologist and it's all great. You know, it was huge, and they publicize these pictures of, look at the Truth About Drugs campaign in association with the Olympics. You know, it's completely separate. The Olympics have nothing to do with Scientology, but they try and use that and capitalize on it as a marketing opportunity. And I think we'll see that in France as well.
Well, one of the things that came up in his speech, and again, it refers to the staffing of these orgs, is that he made a special point about this new golden age of admin and the real difference it's going to make that these Sea Org members have been trained in this new golden age of admin, which is basically, you know, L. Ron Hubbard's myriad of rules about how to run an organization or a business. And that now that they've got these executives trained properly, they're going to fire back to their orgs. And he listed a number of them. That was, I think London was one of them.
Yep.
Tampa. I can't remember the whole list, and then obviously the ones at the new ones, Paris and Austin and Chicago. And to me, and of course, that you could hear in the audio you posted, you could hear the audience just going, "Oh my God, this is incredible! We're going to have these admin trained executives." And I'm thinking, the Ideal Org program is 20 years old. 20 years. None of them has produced the results that David Miscavige promises. But now you're going to send out some executives that have been star rated on L. Ron Hubbard policies and all scored 100%, and that's going to bring in the crowds? I mean, what you were in, does that work for a Scientologist to hear something like that?
Yeah, I think again, this is another example of David Miscavige shooting himself in the foot without even realizing it. We had the golden age of knowledge. Wow, amazing. We had the golden age of tech. Wow, amazing. Then golden age of tech 2. And now the golden age of admin, right? In a few years' time, there's no more golden ages that can happen, right? Because he's already said he found this lost tech and they've redone it. And, they found out they've corrected issues and they're like, this is what LRH really wants. They've done that with the tech, with the admin, with the books. There is nothing else that he can come up with that will reinvigorate everyone, because he can't come out in a few years' time and go, I know I said that we found it and we changed, but actually we were wrong. That just won't fly. So it's great in the short term, but long term, he's shooting himself in the foot, because how is he going to create that enthusiasm again in 5-10 years time? Your question about what it's like inside, I was on staff with the golden age of tech too when that came out, and it was huge. I remember the feeling in the room at London Org Chapel when we were watching the event. It was like, wow, I'm a part of history here. This is huge. Like, it was really special. All of the tech staff had been at Flag for a long period of time training on this program. And you've got to remember, it's kept entirely confidential. They didn't even know what the program was. They didn't know what it was called. We had the new e-meter come out, but they didn't use that new e-meter when they were training at Flag. They came back and actually said they were using the old e-meter, but with the new technology inside it. So they could tell something was up because it was behaving a bit differently to normal, but they didn't know that there was going to be a new e-meter. They didn't know it was called the Golden Age of Tech 2. They just knew it was this like new program. So that confidentiality is huge. And it's been the same with the golden age of admin. We've been talking about this program for a long time, and there's a lot of information out there on your blog, Mike Rinder's blog, and on YouTube and such. But for a Scientologist, this is the first time they have heard the words golden age of admin. Now, people internally that I've spoken to and from posts I've seen on these groups on Facebook, they've all known something has been going on. They've been referring to it as an evolution, and they kind of probably guessed that it was a golden age of admin because there was a golden age of knowledge and golden age of tech. But again, they didn't know. They just knew that something exciting was happening. So all of these staff, not just Sea Org members, staff at Class 5 orgs, have all been at Flag training, and they're going to come back and deliver this new stuff. For a Scientologist inside, it's going to be hugely exciting right now, because this is the last golden age of knowledge. This is the last evolution of stuff that David Miscavige has done. He's restoring the tech. He's found this new stuff. And finally, now we are going to have 100% pure LRH in the orgs. So nothing is going to get in our way for expansion. Like, there are no more roadblocks. Like, finally, this is it. That's the sentiment that I think is going to be heard and felt in every Scientology org right now, off the base of the golden age of admin.
I mean, it's just incredible that they've already opened 68 of these things, which cost something like 20 to 25 million on average. I think the Paris ones, like you said, is a little more expensive, but 20 to 25 million for 68 of them. I mean, it's a couple of $1 billion over 20 years. And now they're saying, oh, wait, now we figured out what's going to make them work. I don't know. It's just amazing to me that he can sell that to these people and they don't go, well, wait a minute. What about those thousands of dollars I gave you 15 years ago? What
Well, I
happened to that?
think of it this way, right? I don't understand how the old timers who were there for the original David Miscavige changing all the tech and then the golden age of knowledge, golden age of tech, like for those people, I'm like, how can you not be tired of this? Because if it was me, I imagine I'd be like, oh yeah, here we go again. There's another golden age. Yeah, whatever. And kind of lose the enthusiasm. But for those people, they've been in Scientology a long time, and there's probably a lot of sunk cost fallacy. They've invested a lot of money and time into this thing. It's their whole life. So I think there's probably an element of just going along with it because, you know, it's too traumatic to really face what the reality is and kind of keeping your head in the sand about it. But I think for the newer, younger staff, you know, like London, for example, for us, even though the Golden Age of Tech 2 was a new thing and, you know, we were all alive for Golden Age of Knowledge, Golden Age of Tech, like this is still a new thing. Like most of the staff at London were not alive when LRH was alive. So all they've known is David Miscavige and these golden ages. So it's still quite an exciting, new, thrilling thing. They haven't had decades of stuff changing and happening all the time. So I get how they can still be excited, but I think that it is a really big problem that they've just not foreseen because what is he going to do? What is he going to pull out of the hat in 10 years' time when the golden age of admin hype has got to die down and the orgs are still empty? You know, he
All
has
right. Well, I
nothing
have a
left.
prediction. I have a prediction. I know, I
OT
know
9 and 10.
you guys will say, well, that, but you'll say that it's covered under Golden Age of Tech. But my prediction for the next one is Golden Age of OT,
Well,
and that'll
interesting you
include
say
9
that.
and 10.
Interesting you say that. I think there's already assembling of that happening because if you look at the service completions for London org, I haven't looked at the other orgs because I just looked up the names that I remember for people being on staff. From about 2013, 2014 through to present time, all of the staff have gone from pure FSRD, very like lower level on the bridge, to like OT3, OT5, right? In a very short period of time, all of the, not just some, all of the staff have suddenly gone to OT level. And I reckon that there is a start of a program going on where they're trying to get all of the staff in all of the orgs to OT. And I think that I thought originally it was part of the golden age of admin, but it's not because it hasn't been mentioned. There is a program in place right now to get the staff
And
to
I
OT. And I
have two
think that's,
reactions.
you're right. I think
I
they're
have
going
two
to
reactions
say
to that.
that's holding people back, that they're not OT.
I have two reactions to that. One, they have nothing to do. There's nobody coming in the door. There's nobody to train. There's nobody to do courses. So they have time to do their OT levels. That's one. The other one is, though, I think Mike has done a lot about how they've got this magical number of uh, OTs on solo knots. If you can get 10,000 of them, you take over the world or something like that. So I think it might have something to do with that. There's a push. But I think you're right. I think there's something going on we maybe not have heard the whole thing about. I remember about 6 years ago when Leah's show got its second season, which was a I remember when it was announced her show came on, there didn't seem to be much reaction from Miscavige. But the day they announced there was going to be a second season, it was like overnight. Scientology went nuts. All those awful websites we see now about Leah all came out like that week. And what I noticed was all of a sudden, Kirstie Alley, Marisol Nichols, Nancy Cartwright, Kelly Preston, all very visibly finished OT7 and OT8. And I thought, okay, there's a program there. Dave has told the celebrities, you got to show me you're on the right team or something like that, you know? So I wondered about that back then, but now, like you're saying, even the lowly staff are going OT. Maybe there is some kind of program there. That's interesting.
And I think you've got to remember David Miscavige plays the long game, right? With Scientology plays the long game in everything that it does. And starting this program now is very smart because Golden Age of Admin's coming out, the hype around that, fantastic. But like I say, in a few years' time, you know, Golden Age of Tech 2 was 2013, 2014. So that's 10 years ago.
Right.
So in 10 years' time, that's about when Everyone has lost their excitement and there needs to be something new. And 10 years is plenty of time to do a program that gets all of the staff around the world to OT, however he wants to do it. And I think by starting that now, he can build up the hype over the next few years of like, oh, there's something going on. You know, all of the staff are going to Flag and all the staff going to St. Neil, and people will get a sense that there's something happening because people are moving around and they're being OT and all of this. And then it gives a little bit of time as well for a bit of a push marketing and promotion wise so that they can come up with some amazing stats about how the org has boomed. And I think, yeah, he's preparing the next evolution. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's OT. That's a really smart
Golden age of
suggestion.
OT. I'm glad I guessed that. I'm glad you made me think maybe that I might be onto something. That's
Yeah.
cool.
I wanted to share with you as well some stats that I think you'll find interesting. So just because we're on the Ideal Org program, when I was on staff at London Org, right, we were booming, right? The birthday game event was, I think we won the birthday game. I left just before it happened, but Dave Miscavige sent Rachel Hastings and a film crew from Gold to come to London to film me and the team and like how we're doing really well at book selling. And it was a huge thing. We were selling like 2,000 books a year on the first year I started on staff. I don't have the stats from the second year, but it was more. I've actually still got the graph to show the weekly sales, but on average, 2,000 books in the year. So one of the staff members at London Org posted on Facebook something about the stats from London last year, and I thought it'd just be interesting to compare, because what did he say? He said that in 2022, 3,500 people walked in to London Org and they sold 800 books to raw public in a year. So that means since I was on staff 9 years ago, it's been a 62% decrease in book sales. And I don't have the stats for walk-ins, people walking in, but it was more than that. They're averaging 10 people a day walking in and 2 books sold, right? That's a dire picture for London Org, and
Well,
it
and
shows
that's
massive
an
contraction.
org that's in a place with foot traffic. What's amazing to me is some of the newer orgs that they've opened in the last 10 years. They're getting away from that. Nobody's going to be walking by the Ventura org. Nobody's
Yeah,
going to be walking by the Austin. I mean, the Austin they will, because that's the college. I'm sorry. But some of these others are, the one in Perth, Australia, they put in a business park. It's a warehouse. Nobody's going to be walking by there. So those numbers don't sound very big, but that's in a prime location with fantastic walking traffic, right?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, Tottenham Court Road is a really big touristy destination, but it just shows that even if they do have good foot traffic, they're struggling. If you look at, for example, Copenhagen, right? Denmark, when they opened the org as Ideal in 2017, Scientology released a press statement saying, 75,000 people walk past the doors of the org every single day. And if you look at the stats from this Facebook post that I found, that, it works out that 0.08% of the foot traffic, of the people that walk past the doors every day, go into the org, right? They are, even if there's high foot traffic, they're not able to get people through the doors, because I think it's widely known now that Scientology is a harmful, dangerous movement. It's a cult that hurts people. It's a much harder task to convince people that this, technology is going to help you and you should come in. And, I think by moving away from city centers, they get bigger, more lavish buildings. It doesn't help them with the foot traffic, but I think it's also an admission that foot traffic is not how they're going to get new people in anymore. It's not going to work. So therefore, it doesn't really matter where the orgs are located. But Paris is another example. It's in a business district. Just before Scientology purchased the building, the owners spent, I can't remember the number, but a couple of million euros refurbishing the building to bring it up to date as an office building, because they wanted to attract a new office company, office buyer. And then Scientology bought it and they just undid all of that refurbishment work that they'd just been spent a load of money doing. It's in an office district. It doesn't have foot traffic. And I think that just shows that goal is not to get people in. The goal is to win over the existing Scientology parishioners and show them how great Scientology is and it's expanding, and also really reaffirm their place in society and kind of really dig their feet in to the community, because they've got these huge buildings that aren't going to go anywhere.
Well, and specifically the wealthy ones, the donors. That's who he's trying to
Yeah.
convince that Scientology is going well, is that yes, they still want people to sign up for courses at the local org and eventually go to Flag and do all the expensive stuff. That's how they make a lot of their money. But as Mark Headley was explaining to me, he said, look, you know, Flag was bringing in up to $2 million a week. It's $100 million a year. And at some point, Dave realized, yeah, but I can get 10 rich guys to give me 10 million each. We don't have to do any work.
Yeah.
And that clearly has become more of the emphasis in recent years. Well, how do you convince Tom Cummins, Jim Bridgeforth, Trisha Duggan? How do you convince these people to keep giving more money? Is you have to show them new buildings
Mm-hmm.
and say, "Look, we're expanding like crazy." That's what this is all about. I know there are people that will try to convince us. No, it's like for example, one thing people always say to me is, "Well, they have to spend money or they'll lose their tax exemption." Hey, the Catholic Church is closing dioceses all over the country. Nobody's talking about them losing their tax exemption. That's not how it works.
And
They are buying these buildings simply to impress wealthy people. Yeah, they end up with real estate, but it doesn't always make sense. Some of these things they're buying are going to be really hard to sell again someday later. They're
and
very
also,
specific buildings for specific uses.
yeah, look at the stats as well that Scientology are presenting at these events. Even when I was on staff, right, I remember the focus in these events being, we helped this number of people, we got this number of people in. And I know we haven't had a birthday game event just yet, in recent times, but even at the IES event and the New Year's event, there'd be talk about numbers to do with people. If you listen to the two events that we've just published, it's not about the people. The stats that they're presenting are, we gave out this number of booklets, we've expanded, we're opening this number of square foot of new property, we did this. It's all numbers to do with output and numbers to do with physical size, not people.
Now,
And I
there was
think the
one
reason,
exception, Alex, and I did want to ask you about this because you're absolutely right. They were talking about the number of materials they gave out or the
yeah,
number of offices they sanitized and all that
and that's
garbage.
because the donors have paid money for that, so
They
that's
paid money,
impressing
exactly.
them. Yeah.
The one exception was near the end of the New Year's event, the recognition of the FSMs. And I have to say, without any fact checking, of course, the numbers sounded pretty impressive that this many thousand FSMs have brought in this many 100,000 of people into the bridge. And I'm just like thinking, I don't know. We just don't see those people. We don't see that kind of activity. What do you think about those statistics? Because that was about people and not about objects.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that just shows the focus, right? So the numbers they're presenting to wow people is booklets and square footage, which is to impress the big donors. And the FSM numbers is to impress the parishioners, right? And it's a different marketing tact. Again, I have a feeling that there's been some program or something in the FSM field for a few years in Scientology, and I think that there's more to come from that. And I think the fact that he mentioned it at the New Year's event is evidence of that. In these Facebook groups with these posts that are coming through, that again, it's just for Scientologists, and they have no idea that I have access to some of these posts and I'm seeing some of these things. There is a big push for people to become FSMs and help recruit people. And it's interesting because the FSM program used to be huge. And then, we all know the story about how it kind of got shut down a little bit because people were taking too much money. And there was a SEAL member that bought was it a Ferrari or a Dodge or a Corvette or something? I was hearing on one of your podcasts the other day. And so it kind of got pushed down. And I get the sense that it's being revitalized. And I think a part of that is probably to do with the giving people something to do and that can help in the expansion, giving them, rather than just being at the mercy of, David Miscavige. It's like, no, cool. It's your duty to bring people into Scientology, and you can make some money from it too. There's these power FSMs and these power FSM summits that are happening very regularly now, where people are being encouraged to go out in the field and recruit new people, and you get your 10 or 15% commission off it. I think that again, there's an underground, deeper level program or something that's going on that's trying to encourage people to do that. Um, Elena Cardone, Grant Cardone's wife, is giving a speech at the Flag or at Flag in January, I think it is, about being a power of about how to recruit people and get people in. And I think that's one of the ways that he's trying to sell to these big donors. It's not just about money. I want you to do something to promote Scientology as well, rather than just donate money, because a poor Scientologist is going to be rather drained right now, having just been regged for a load of cash at the IES event, regged for loads of money at the New Year's event. You've got the birthday game coming up, and they're going to be quite, I imagine, tired of giving money over. It's definitely fundraising season in Scientology. So having something like the FSM program is like, hey, cool. This is another way you can help that's not going to cost you money. And actually, you can earn a bit of money from it too. And I think it reignites that flame a little bit. So it's smart. It's a smart move.
It's interesting if he's going back to that, because what we saw was that under Hubbard there was definitely a franchise system, and you could open your own center, your own small mission. You could make quite a bit of money introducing people to Scientology and moving them onto the org. And then Miscavige just decimated that whole system. And what was interesting to me about his Ideal Org program was that with all these, the number one thing about the Ideal Orgs to me that he was interested in were these video displays that explained Scientology. And what that said to me was that David Miscavige no longer trusted Scientologists to sell Scientology. He wanted these films he made to do it.
Mm.
And that was a total failure. And so maybe he's realized that now, that if he's going to get any kind of recruitment at all, he's got to go back to the human touch. He's got to go back to the FSM.
And I think that happened a while ago. I mean, we haven't spoken about this, but when I was on staff, I was in Div 6. My job was to recruit people and to sell books. And from what I hear people talking about the way the films were used, or it just doesn't match up with my experience on staff. When I was being trained and when I was getting people in, taking them on tours around the info center, it was very much these videos and stuff were a tool. You can use them to enlighten people. But ultimately, you're the salesperson. You're the one that needs to find the ruin and sell the book or the course or get them to do a personality test. Like, the video was a part of the process, part of the journey, but it wasn't
Okay.
integral.
Okay.
People would come in and I would take them on tours around the information center and not play them any videos, right? And just show them the different display panels. But the whole point was get them in a conversation, ask them questions, find their ruin,
Find the
and then
ruin.
sell them the book or give them an OCA test. It was very much use it to help you do what you need to do as a reg. And that's what it was like. It might have been different in other orgs, but for us at London, that's how we did it. And I think that that's maybe the change that you were talking about that's happened over time. And we're now at a place where he's probably doing that again. Think about it. He crushed the FSM system because people were making too much money and he wasn't making any money. Well, now he's got the money problem sorted with these big donors giving money for the Ideal Org program. Well, it's not a risk anymore. And actually, getting these people to do the promotion and stuff will help him. It's not a financial risk. So why not bring it back? I think it's smart. And I think that it links to the OT thing. If you go OT and you become an FSM, it's your duty as a Scientologist to recruit people. I'll handle the money, I'll handle the buildings. Now we've got these amazing Ideal Orgs all over the world and they've all opened and we've got all these staff. They're all OT and they're all admin trained. Now it's over to you as a parishioner to fill them up with people. I think that's the sentiment. That's just a guess, but that's what I imagine is happening.
Well, we've now seen at the IAS speech and the New Year's speech, Dave talking about all the successes of CCHR, the successes of the volunteer ministers, the successes of Narcanon, the expansion. They've got these 4 new Ideal Orgs plus a continental Narcanon in Africa. and new AO they're working on in Mexico City. All it, if you just listen to Dave, things are great. But you and I know, if we look, particularly Mike's particularly good at his blog at recording actual, you know, uh, evidence from the things that people are saying inside that suggest they're struggling, they can't staff people, they're having a hard time putting things together. And of course, anecdotally, we hear about these orgs being empty. So I'm not convinced, based on what David Miscavige is saying, that Scientology is doing so well. But what evidence would you need, Alex, to convince you that maybe Dave has turned a corner and maybe Scientology is starting to do better based on what he's saying?
Do you mean as a Scientologist when I was on staff?
No, no, now. What would
I
convince you that they're doing what he's saying?
I don't think it's possible to convince me of that because that's not the truth. David Miscavige is not, he hasn't turned a corner and created this new era of expansion. In fact, I think it's a new era of contraction. Scientology is shrinking at a rate of knots. And, the stats, like I just said about London Org, 62% decrease in book sales over, 9 years. It shows, it paints a very dire picture for Scientology. And for a critic now, I think there needs to be a lot to show that Scientology is expanding, and all it would take is some real stats, David Miscavige to come out and say, we've sold this number of books at this org, and that number to be higher than the last number we got from that org. The census data, 2021, the census showed a huge decrease in number of Scientologists here in the UK. Well, in a few years' time, we'll have the next census, and that number is not going to lie. That number is a government statistic that's, not associated with Scientology. If that number is higher, that evidence is that Scientology has grown. Like, that's the data that would prove it has grown. But this is all stuff that as a Scientologist, you don't look at. When I was in London Org, yes, I knew that the video is being faked because we had to get people in to like make it look busy and stuff. But it was like, yeah, well, we just want to inspire people and show like how cool it is here, and take it with a pinch of salt. But when the org was empty and not doing so well, we didn't think that the whole of Scientology was like that. We just thought it was just us. All the other orgs are doing it well and we're just doing something wrong. So we need to up our game. That's the sentiment inside. So I don't think for a Scientologist, David Miscavige is under so much pressure to prove the expansion because they just genuinely believe this is an exciting time. And I think there's also the element of the internal focus of getting everyone to go OT, golden age of admin, training everybody. The focus at the moment actually might not be expansion of new Scientologists. It's all getting the current Scientologists to a place where they can really, really start expanding. So I think that's where the head, like the head of the mind of a Scientologist is right now. But that's just my guess based on how I think I would be feeling having been there.
And in the New Year's event, we got to hear at least the new Super Bowl ad, which seemed kind of quiet based compared to previous years. But this will be 10 years now that they've been doing the Super Bowl ads. I guess this will be the 11th actually. And I always have to point out to people, they say, "Wow, it's like, isn't it like $6 million for a half 30 seconds?" No, Scientology never buys a national ad. The way the Super Bowl is broadcast, there are a couple of local spots in that 3.5 hours where the local station can sell an ad to a local car dealer. Everything else are those gigantic, incredibly expensive national ads, but there are a couple of local spots. Scientology buys those, and they only buy them in certain cities. So that's why on the night of the Super Bowl, I always ask people on Twitter, let me know if you saw the ad or not. And then we can see, okay, it played in New York, it played in LA, it played in San Francisco, it played in Seattle, it played in Atlanta. Only certain cities get to see the ad. But, people are still blown away. They can't believe they've seen a Scientology ad in the Super Bowl. And I have to say, they spend a lot of money. They're well done. They're mystery sandwiches. I mean, they don't tell you a thing about what Scientology actually is. Had those started by the time before you left?
Yeah, I
You
remember.
remember seeing one?
Yeah, I remember the when they revealed the new e-meter, right? And it was around the time of the Golden Age Tech 2. I remember watching the New Year's event. I was in the chapel at London Org, and they're like, right, and now we're going to play the new Super Bowl ad. And for a British person, Super Bowl, whatever. We don't have Super Bowl here. We don't have American football. We do a little bit, but like it's not a thing for us. So that doesn't really have an appeal. But the more like this is an event and we've got an advert, that was what was special about it. And
Right.
I will never forget, there was an audible gasp in the room because it was the first time an e-meter was being shown in a public video, public commercial. And it was the new e-meter. It looked really cool and space age. And it was like, wow, we are for the first time being open about what Scientology really is. We're not hiding anything. We're not pretending. We are actually literally showing the e-meter in an advert. Like, wow, people are going to be blown away by this because we're being so honest about us, about ourselves. Like, it was huge, right? And of course, it never played on British TV because Scientology got in trouble last time they ran an advert on British TV because it was an advert called "Our Help Is Yours," and it was all about the fourth dynamic campaigns, truth about drugs and all of that. And it got banned by the advertising authorities here because they lied about the number of people that were being helped by their programs, and they couldn't prove that they'd helped this number of million people or whatever. And so the ad got banned because there's really strict rules in the UK about making claims in adverts. And so since then, I think they've only run a handful of adverts, but mostly on YouTube. Like they are focusing their efforts on digital marketing, which I think is smart anyway as a marketing person. But yeah, I think that's what we're going to see more of, is that shift towards online promotion. And, Scientology are the biggest advertiser on my YouTube channel. I get so many reports every single week of people saying, a Scientology ad came up before watching your video the other day. Like they don't realize that they are literally paying me to make content about them because they pay YouTube to advertise. And then I get a very, very small percentage of that ad revenue. They're not the smartest of the bunch, but online I think is where it's going. And I think that this ad, again, it's an example to reinvigorate Scientologists and go, wow, look, we're doing something here and it's cool, it's well produced, and we're showing the world what we're all about. I think it's just another thing to get excited about.
One other number that came from the speech, at one point, David Miscavige referred to 11 million people starting on the bridge in these last 3 years or something like that. And that to me was big because, you can never pin them down on how many Scientologists there are in the world. They always refer to just millions. At one point in 2012, they put out a TV ad that claimed there were 4 million new people joining Scientology every year. Incredible, incredible number. We know that they have nothing like that. It's probably more like 20 or 30,000 people. But I just thought it was interesting that he said 11 million. And you know how Scientology is. If anybody buys a book or takes a course, they're considered a Scientologist. So, Scientology right there is claiming 11 million new people. I mean, you'd think if there were 11 million new Scientologists in the last 3 years, you might bump into one once in a while.
Well, I think also it's another example of how David Miscavige and Scientology don't just inflate their figures, but they outright lie about things. If you look on the Scientology website where they were talking about the new Qual building at St. Hill, they say how great this new 20,000 square foot building is. If you look at the planning documents, it's 12,000 square foot, right? Like literally their own planning application and the thing that was approved, 12,000 square foot, and yet the press release has almost doubled the real size. They are inflating that number, but they're also outright lying. David Miscavige talks about getting religious recognition in Greece at the IES event. Well, it was only a couple of months ago that Greece issued a statement about how worried they were that Scientology, which is a cult considered a sect in Greece, is trying to infiltrate society, and they're running through these front groups because they cannot have an organization called Church of Scientology. And he's gone to the IS event and said, we got religious recognition in Greece. He talked about at the New Year's event, Hungary and all the great work that they're doing there and expanding. Well, It's only the other day that 11 Scientology executives were charged with a $1.7 million fraud case, having raided 30 Scientology buildings over a couple of years, 2017, I think it was, and seized 2,000 documents and fined them for data protection breaches. And now this fraud, like, he is lying through his teeth. And it's not a surprise for us, but for Scientologists, they don't know that. They don't realize this is the case. So when they hear 11 million, they're like, wow, that's amazing. 11 million is that's higher than the population of London. So apparently there are more Scientologists than there are Londoners. How can you possibly believe that? Well, because it's not us. We're small here, but other orgs are bigger. They're doing it better. So all the 11 million Scientologists, they must mostly be in America. If you go to America, there must be Scientologists everywhere. Well, in America, they're probably thinking, if you go to Europe, there must be everywhere. That's what they're thinking to justify the fact that they're not seeing the reality of the numbers they're being told.
Well, it's been fun putting out those video, audio, and transcript. I'm glad you and I got to do that. Can you give us some other updates on what you've been doing since the IAS protest? I think you've been keeping busy.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's been so fun to work with you on this as well. I think a point I just wanted to make very briefly is that, collaboration is the way forward. And I think, a high tide raises all ships is a really important quote, I think, or statement. If we work together, we work better and we achieve better things. And that's why I love working with you and Chris on this New Year's Eve event. It's like, we're all trying to do the same thing. We're all helping each other, and look at the results. We had the audio transcript done and we had the video, and I think it's great. And it's just paving the way for like more stuff to come. So thank you. And, I'm loving doing this, and I'm looking forward to like what 2024 will bring. Especially considering the East Grinstead stuff. So I got some Freedom of Information Act requests back the other day, and I will be releasing them very soon. I'll give you a little bit of a scoop here because I haven't published them yet. I've got internal emails that went on between the council and the licensing department and the premises license stuff that I talked about before. And I'll be releasing them. But essentially, the road closure, it's fascinating. I can now see what actually happened behind the scenes. So essentially, I applied for the road to be closed to do the protest, and then all panic ensued. And the story of like it was cancelled and then it wasn't, and then it was misinformation. Well, what actually happened was Councillor Dick Sweatman, who is the biggest Scientology supporter there is in the local area. He goes to all of the events and so on. Councillor Dick Sweatman contacted the East Grinstead Council road closure department as soon as our road closure application was filed, and asked on behalf of the Church of Scientology, how can the Church of Scientology apply to close the road themselves? And then the road closure people were like, well, they just need to apply. Like, firstly, why are you asking that question? And secondly, why are you asking and not the Church of Scientology?
Right.
Scientology has obviously gone to their contact in the council, who's then gone and done some digging. And they put in an application to close the same road on the same day at the same time, with the intention of preventing us protesters from being able to be there on the day. And that caused some confusion because some people thought that the road closure that was granted was for the church, but in actual fact, it was me because I applied first and I got it approved. Anyway, back and forth emails, fascinating to see what went on. And then there's also, if you look at the licensing thing, how I found out that their premises license required them to give 6 weeks notice of the event. Again, I've got all of those emails now. They went and did an inspection, and they went to St. Hill and said, hey, you haven't given us the health and safety documents and procedures. You haven't given us notice what's going on. Janet Laveau, who is, I believe she's the commanding officer of OSA in the UK. She's the managing director of COSRECI, the UK Church of Scientology on paper. She's the one that spoke to the licensing department and basically said, oh, I'm so sorry. Like, it's my first year doing this IES event thing. So I didn't know that we had to do that. I'm really sorry. And the licensing guys were like, well, where's the, because you have to have what's called a DPS, a designated premises supervisor, who's the person responsible for the license. He wasn't there. He's not in. So they have to file a new DPS. What happened to him? Don't know. Maybe he's left the Sea Org, or maybe he's been moved to a different city or country. But Janet was like, it's my first year. I didn't know. And so the council were like, okay, we'll cut you some slack. Just make sure you file it by the end of the day. Janet Laveau has been at St. Hill for like 20 years, and she is the boss of the DPS, the guy who was, in charge of it before. She has been doing and running the IES event for years. She knows exactly what she's doing. But because it's the first time she personally has contacted the council, she used that as an excuse. And the emails back and forth just show the council were trying to cut some slack and said, oh, one minor breach was found. So we just wrote them an email and said, don't do it again. And I'm just making the point that, the breach of the license condition, which is not giving them the 6 weeks notice that they were supposed to, is in British law a major violation. It's considered a major crime that's punishable by a £20,000 fine and or 6 months imprisonment. So why have the council decided to be so favorable to Scientology in this instance? Well, it's because safe pointing is very much in full force. We know now that the mayor has gone to not just 3, but 9 Scientology events this year alone. And the infiltration goes much deeper than I originally thought. There are something like 8 or 9 counselors that I have uncovered have all gone to Scientology events this year and have had email communications with them and been very supportive. Scientology were running the East Grinstead gazebo, the town council gazebo, the official Christmas night switch on event. They are fully in bed with the council. The council is fully in bed with Scientology. It's a worrying picture that's being painted, and the pressure is mounting. I launched a petition the other day that's got just under 800 signatures now, trying to say to the council, stop supporting this group, because it's just making them look bad from a PR perspective. There are many other groups that they can support in the local community that don't come with the PR headache of Scientology. Why are they doing it? So yeah, it's fascinating. But if anyone wants to sign the petition, change.org/Scientology.
That's a great URL.
I've got so many good URLs like that. I don't know how I managed it. Scientologybusiness.com. How do they not have that URL? Like, I honestly, I don't know. But yeah, it's going to be an exciting year. 2024 has got a lot, I think, in store for us, I think, from a Scientology perspective, but also from some of the things going on behind the scenes. And I'm excited to see what it will bring for us. And I'm looking forward to continuing to work closely with you and, getting some stuff out there and, getting to know more of the community and seeing what's going to happen, because I think it's, a very tough time for Scientology right now from a public relations perspective. The pressure is mounting.
You've definitely been one of the highlights of 2023, and I think people are thrilled with the work you've been doing, and I can't wait to see what happens this coming year.
Thanks, Tony. I appreciate it.
All right, Alex. Thank you very much, man.
Thank you.